shovels, and even the workers themselves. And then the methods would be the technical procedures. So this includes access, staging, demo techniques, and paving sequences. So key differences between contractor means and methods and contract requirements. So means and methods is how the contractor chooses to perform the work. So usually contractors put together work plans for every operation that they're working on. And in the work plans, they have detailed step-by-step instructions on how they're going to build the work. But the work plan can change at any time during the operations if it needs to be modified. So if they find that something isn't working out properly, they're not being as efficient as they want it to be, or they need to modify the way that their safety and quality plan is, then they can modify it at any time that they're working on the operation. It can also be used at the pre-con meeting to explain to HDOT how the work will be built. But on the other hand, the contract requirements detail what the contractor must deliver. And then means and methods is chosen by the contractor. The contractor is responsible for them. And it's flexible, provided they produce compliant work. But the contract requirements are established by HDOT in the contract documents. The engineer verifies compliance with them, and it's mandatory. It can't be changed without written authorization. So first question, who's accountable for construction means and methods? And you can just write it in the chat. So A, is it HDOT, B, the contractor, or C, the architect and the engineer who designed the plans? Okay, good. Yeah, good job. Everyone is saying B. So yes, the contractor is accountable for his means and methods. So why does this matter? The contract plans and specs define the required work, the required end product, not how to build it. This allocation of responsibility ensures the contractor is accountable for its means and methods and helps protect HDOT from construction-related claims and liability. So per the standard spec section 105.01, the engineer will make decisions on all questions that may arise regarding the contract. However, per section 105.17, the contractor means and methods must be designed to meet precise contract requirements, regardless of established tolerances. So in summary, even though the engineer has broad authority over contractor performance, the contractor always retains responsibility over their means and methods. So section 105.01 explains what the engineer has authority over. So this would include interpretation of contract requirements, acceptability of materials, manner, performance, and rate of progress, acceptable fulfillment of the contract, and compensation under the contract. It also explains the inspector's authority and what they will inspect. So this includes the work done, materials furnished, preparation, fabrication, and manufacture of materials. And then section 105.11 explains that the inspections are performed for the exclusive benefit of the state. And the failure to inspect the work shall not relieve the contractor of their obligation to produce conforming work, to correct defective work, and to replace unsuitable or rejected materials. So again, the contractor retains responsibility to produce conforming work, even when the state does or does not inspect the work. So what happens when work is covered before inspections are done? When the contract documents or a written directive from the engineer requires that certain work not proceed until the engineer is given notice and the opportunity to inspect, the engineer may order the work done or materials used without the engineer having been given notice and opportunity to inspect to be removed and replaced at no increase in contract price or contract time. And then section 105.12 goes over removal of non-conforming and unauthorized work. So all work that does not conform to the requirements of a contract shall be remedied or removed and replaced by the contractor at no increase in contract price, time, or both. And no payment will be made for non-conforming work. So let's go over this example of rebar being covered before the inspector has a chance to take a look at it. So the contractor was constructing a cast-in-place concrete foundation for a new overhead destination sign structure. The contract required the contractor to notify the RE at least 24 hours before the rebar inspection. So HDOT could verify reinforcing bar size, spacing, lap links, clear cover, and anchor bolt placement. The contractor fell behind schedule and decided to place the concrete during the night shift without notifying the HDOT inspector. The following morning, the inspector arrived expecting to inspect the rebar, but discovered the foundation had already been poured. So how do you respond? A, let it go. Always trust the contractor because they are the experts. B, ask the contractor to show you pictures of the rebar before it was poured. Some of the work in the pictures look compliant, but none document the actual measurements of lapping, spacing, or concrete cover. Or C, direct the contractor to expose the work.
So basically, once they pass that 10, it'll be kind of like constantly rotating out, you know. Intention.
Okay.
So saying,
Yeah, so
once we start rolling,
I guess that this one is a little bit tricky.
Shifts and then
But the way that I would what I would do is have the contractor expose the work. Sorry. So I guess it depends on a lot of things, right? What you're in the case of B, the pictures aren't very clear, and you have no real documentation of what the measurements were. So I would have them expose part of the work. So findings, continuing with this example, The investigation revealed several deficiencies. So two number 11 reinforcing bars were omitted. Anchor bolts were misaligned beyond allowable tolerances. The concrete cover was less than specified in several locations. So the foundation in this case did not conform to the contract documents. So how do you respond to that? What I would do is first verbally discuss the issues with the contractor. Then I would follow up with a detailed field order to stop or modify means and methods. And the work plans that I was talking about earlier should have important hold points, such as making sure that all inspections are completed before the concrete is poured. But at a minimum, the field order should explain that the contractor failed to provide the required notice to inspect. It should have a detailed explanation of all the deficiencies found. And you can cite sections 105.11 and 12 to direct the contractor to remove the entire foundation, dispose of non-conforming concrete, install rebar correctly, and request inspection before repouring. And this field directive should be sent to them in a timely manner. Yeah, don't wait too long to send it. Okay, so true or false. In the previous example, HDOT is responsible for granting a time extension and compensation for the rework. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. False. So again, section 105.11, the contractor covered work before providing the engineer an opportunity to inspect. And the contract requirements did state that the RE has to be given a 24-hour notice before the rebar is inspected. In this specific example. And they didn't do that. So and then also per section 105.12, the work was determined to be non-conforming and had to be removed and replaced. So Andy asked, what if exposing the work degrades the foundation? Are you talking about like the like underneath the concrete, or just like the entire concrete foundation that they had poured?
I guess it's that the strength of the foundation is degraded to expose the rebars to check if it was conforming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in this case, they found that the work was non-conforming. So I would just have them take out the concrete entirely, fix whatever issues need to get done, and then re-pour it.
So, Adriana, what's the
Yes.
case if you find out that it was conforming? Is there a split between HDOT and the contractor?
Yeah, I gotta look to see what the standard specs say about that. I remember Kai saying that then in that case, HDOT would pay for some of it.
Well, Kai's saying it would be discussed before opening it up. So probably a negotiation.
This would be considered during the investigation and decision to open it up. Yeah.
No, I guess the answer to Andy would be, obviously we wouldn't compromise the foundation. So you would have to have that discussion. And I don't think these examples are meant to get into that kind of depth. I'm pretty sure and I'll go look at the citation, but if you open it up and it's found conforming, then DOT pays. But let me go find the citation.
Yeah, good questions. Okay, so recognizing problematic means and methods. Some indicators can include repeated quality issues, unsafe operations. So where workers are working with no PPE, working at heights of fall protection, this can cause a lot of issues. Inefficient force account work, improper sequencing, improper curing, poor drainage control, and traffic control using unsafe conditions. Causing unsafe conditions, sorry. So inefficient force account performance. I bet many of you have shown up to a job site where the contractor working on force account work and very little is happening. So per section 109.06, the contractor has the duty to perform the work payable under this provision efficiently and economically. When the engineer determines the contractor is working inefficiently or uneconomically, the engineer may direct the contractor to stop, modify its means and methods, or the engineer may specifically direct means and methods of doing the force account work. So let's take a look at another example. During a force account operation of an HDOT, on an HDOT project, the contractor was directed to perform additional excavation and utility relocation work that could not be priced in advance. Because the scope was uncertain, the work was being compensated on a force account basis under section 109.06. The operation started 2 weeks ago. One day, the resident engineer and inspector arrived at the work site to verify the force account operation. Upon arriving at the site during the middle of the shift, the engineer observed that all equipment was off, 3 laborers were standing together talking, 2 operators were sitting on the concrete barrier drinking water, the operator foreman was on the phone, and only 2 laborers were actively installing pipe in the trench. At the end of the shift, the contractor submitted the force account sheet, which listed all personnel and equipment as working continuously during that time period. So this is not their first day. The operation started 2 weeks ago, and it's not lunchtime. So how would you respond? Do you sign the force account sheet without questioning the idle labor and equipment? Immediately kick the contractor off the job without discussing. Discuss the observations with a contractor. If there's no justification for the inefficient operations, inform the contractor that time associated with idle labor and equipment will not be approved for payment, or direct the contractor to modify its operation by reducing the number of laborers assigned to the task, removing any equipment not being utilized, coordinating excavation and hauling so equipment remains productive, and reorganizing the crew so workers could perform simultaneous tasks instead of waiting. This one's a little bit tricky. And it would be interesting to hear from some of you guys that are answering why you would choose C. But if it were up to me, I would do both C and D. But your response depends on various factors, right? So if this contractor's operation always looked like this every single time you showed up, and you had previously discussed it with them several times, and you had already directed them to modify their means and methods, then I would probably give them a final warning. But if you showed up and they're almost done with the operation, excuse me, they're close to being done with the operation, then I would discuss reducing or downsizing their crew size and taking some equipment off rent. Nainoa said B. Yeah, but definitely not A. You definitely want to discuss with the contractor before you decide. So yes, this all goes back to the engineer making a decision, right? So the contractor's responsibility never goes away. So even if the engineer reviews the method, does not object, observes the work, performs inspections, modifies or directs means and methods of performing force account work, the contractor remains responsible for meeting contract requirements, dimensions, tolerances, performance, safety, quality, and environmental compliance. Key takeaways. So the engineer has broad authority over contract requirements. The contractor retains responsibility over their means and methods. Inspection protects the state. Means and methods must produce conforming work and intervene when necessary on forced account work. Any questions? There was some comments that were in the chat box over here. Let's see. So Marvin asked, engineer's authority is considered the resident engineer, the project engineer, construction engineer, district engineer. What if contractor's means and methods is reviewed by consultant designer and is not approved after going back and forth? Okay, and then Kai responded, previous training has stated the engineer should be designated during the pre-con. We'll verify officially is that. I agree, the CE is that during the pre-con would designate the engineer. Okay, so the engineer is selected on each project during the pre-con meeting, is that right?
So I'm not sure how it's happening in practice. I know when we had these discussions previously with the pre-con, the contract requires that it is the highway administrator, though the highway administrator does not sign off on progress payments and change orders and things like that. So in the pre-con template, there is an area that it talks about who the engineer is. So in practicality, I'm not quite sure if everybody is filling that in, but that was the resolution that we came to when we did the pre-con training. So I'm not sure if people on the line can opine on whether they're actually doing that or not. So that would be, the engineer authority part. Other, is this,
I thought that was on the
Cal-
template. On
It-
your e-construction site. It's on the template.
correct. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It should be on the template. So but I haven't checked, all of the when people actually do the pre-con, if they are filling that out and who they're using, because it was a little bit with neighbor islands, it may be the construction engineers in scenarios where they're using consultants. On Oahu, it might be a project engineer or a resident engineer. So that's why it was a little bit open for the actual project staff to work with their construction engineers to determine who that would be depending on island and just how they operate. And I think somebody in the chat did point out the 105 section. Calvin I was trying to cut and paste it. Let me see if that's Julian, I think, has the correct citation on who pays for what and when. It is in 105. Does that cover the, I'm not sure if I hit all the questions.
Yeah.
I'm trying to cut and paste the provision, but I might have to. It's not letting me add it to the thing. She's got 105.15.3, and then there's a 1 and 2 as well. So that, I think the 3 was the one that you were talking about. 1 and 2 also have discussion on who pays for what and when. So 1 says if it's exposed and inspected work conforms with the contract, the state will reimburse reasonable cost of exposing, inspecting, restoring the work as extra work and extend the contract. If it's exposed and inspected work is non-conforming or otherwise not acceptable, the cost and time related to exposing and inspecting and restoring is not reimbursable. And then I think you, Julianne, quoted the third one: no reimbursement will be allowed for cost and time exposing if they weren't given the opportunity to inspect. And I think that was the point of the example. As far as the, going back and forth on the means and methods with the designer, I know some of the contracts require a plan, and the plans have to be approved by the designers. So in those instances, I do think that the designers have a reasonable, it depends, right? I'm not sure what the back and forth is about, but there's a design methodology. I think that if, I don't know, I remember working on certain bridges. You couldn't do this in demoing. You couldn't do one thing before you did the next, because if you demoed and there wasn't the appropriate rebar, you would potentially collapse the structure before the full demo had proceeded. So there are usually engineering reasons that those plans are requested by the designer, but without specifics, it's really hard to understand what the back and forth is about. So I would defer that to, your resident engineer, construction engineers on the specifics. I think this training was requested in more general, and we were focused on, the difference between the force account and other just general means and methods. I'm pasting the entire 105 in the chat right now. Oh, so I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not sure what the back and forth was about between the contractors, means and methods, or the contractor and the consultant designer. But wouldn't that, so if the designer is saying, no, we want you to build it this way, wouldn't that put all the liability on HDOT because they're the consultant for HDOT? I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
scary.
I mean, it just, again, it depends on the instance, right? The one I'm thinking of was a demo plan, and the reason it was there was rebar was missing in certain areas. And so depending on how you proceeded with demo, if you did one part, like it was a superstructure that held the abutments back because there was no rebar that tied the footing to the abutment. And because of that, you had to sequence the demo. Otherwise, you could be, if you took the superstructure off without bracing, then you would, the abutments would fall and collapse the whole structure. So that's why I'm saying there are usually, hopefully, engineering reasons that a sequence has to be provided. And maybe sometimes it's analyzing the traffic that you would be blocking and making sure it's acceptable. So it's really hard to cover that in general. It depends on the scenario and the specific project.
Right.
But I would also say you usually have those things in the plans. The plans say we need to check this plan before proceeding. It's hard to speak to, why those things are in there. But like I said, on some of my projects, I could see why they have it. And in those cases, the designer does have to approve it. If the contractor wants to challenge the designer's methodology, then you go into claim and it's a whole other scenario, right?
Does this happen a lot? Who asked the question? Was it you, Marvin? That prompted this deep dive?
I did
Deep dive.
initiate it, but I didn't mean for it to go this deep. It was related to the earlier discussion.
Got it. No, I guess I'm just wondering how often we run into this situation, because Kai, obviously you experienced it and have some detailed understanding of it, but I'm wondering if other people have encountered it or felt or have any concerns, I
an
guess,
issue.
after that explanation.
Yeah.
Is there any concerns around that topic, or is everybody comfortable checking in with somebody who has experience in this area if the situation were to arise?
I think it just depends on the particular projects and the situation that arise at that time, and if the RE or the construction engineer gets involved, maybe, to help work things out. Otherwise, it's definitely going to lead to delays in projects, and everything's at a standstill if that's part of the critical path.
Right. I guess when I listen to you guys run through these trainings, we get into these, more difficult situations, which really only represents a small percentage of these situations, sounds like. So for me, I just wanted to make sure everybody was seems like because it only happens a small percentage of time, you've got people you'd consult, right, Marvin? Like you're saying, you're going to elevate. That's why we've got REs and construction engineers.
Yeah, sometimes it's out of our control. It depends on how much the contract plans and specs have enough information that the project can just begin smoothly and everybody's on the same page. But sometimes it's not like that, and that's a lot. It relates to a lot of why some projects get delayed.
Is Brent on this call or Daryl? I haven't ran into a delay for that reason yet, I guess, Marvin. That's what I was going to ask. But hey, if you guys feel comfortable moving back to another topic, Marvin, you asked a question about the engineer in charge. Kind of got a little lost on that. And initially I thought I don't need to really understand it, but as you got into it, it seemed like something important. What was the summary of what you guys covered on that? Can somebody help me with that? Just the most concise version. Is there ever any confusion about who the engineer in charge is? Is that what's
Yeah,
happening
so
out there? 'Cause I
Kaha,
missed it.
that engineer in charge, according to our specs, it's an administrator, yeah. But we've changed it on our pre-construction agenda to reflect the resident engineer.
Right, which I always thought was the case. I remember having a conversation with George a long time ago, and he is pretty firm and confident on that.
Yeah, but that was, if you look at our specs, the
Yeah,
2005
no, I'm
specs,
saying, yeah, no, I'm saying, I think you're right, Daryl, but I'm glad you caught that because, you know,
I
when
think
that
the
came up
only,
years ago,
yeah,
somebody
but
disagreed. Go ahead.
no, the only issue is the neighbor islands don't have resident engineers.
Then it becomes what, the construction engineer?
Correct.
yeah,
So
for
it
our
has to be
purposes,
designated in the
Yeah.
pre-con because statewide it's a little different.
Okay.
Well, for some offices, the resident might push it down to the project engineer to run the meetings and sometimes the responsibilities too. But for the project engineers, it shouldn't lie there. But we do run the pre-construction meetings. And so that
So,
designation, it seems kind of weird. Sometimes I would reference the RE, but sometimes he wants the project engineer responsible. Like way back when the construction engineer would initiate the meetings and then delegate it down to the resident engineer of the field office on Oahu. And then, yeah, in time has changed where the resident engineer may feel the project engineers are responsible. But we don't have the authority to do the approvals of everything. So that's, I generally ask that question, and it's supposed to be understood that the RE would take the responsibility, but sometimes they might have a different idea.
hey, so back to you, Daryl, real quick. You pointed out a kind of a bit of a discrepancy in what is in the contract versus what is happening in the field. I guess my question becomes, have we ran into any conflict with the contractor or any contractor where they, you know, pushed back on you or your RE or even your PE on who's in charge and who's issuing direction on at the working level in the field? Have we had any issues?
with the contractor, not really.
Okay, so you're just mostly pointing out that, hey, we found something that is a bit of a, could be a risk. Is that what we're saying? Could be a risk, but not yet has come to fruition.
Um,
This language discrepancy where it highlights what did we say, the administrator versus the RE?
uh,
I guess,
so
but
that is probably something that should be discussed offline.
okay. Well, I didn't realize that we can. I just wanted to know if there's something that you ran into. Obviously, yeah, I guess it is offline. The other question is, Daryl, are you seeking to have that language changed or included